Welcome to the third in our Team Black Sheep PowerCube series. In the first two videos we had a look at what the PowerCube was, and then in the second video we actually installed it into a frame. So here it is in the middle of the frame that we've been flying with. This is a ZMR 250. Now the majority of people that use the PowerCube are going to be adding FPV equipment to it, and Team Black Sheep have put some thought into how this piece of technology can support FPV kit. So we're going to cover that in this video. So a big thank you to Trappy and the team at Team Black Sheep for sending us some of the extra bits to add in here. We're going to be looking at something called a TBS core. TBS core is actually the on-screen display system that comes from Team Black Sheep, and also something called a Unify Pro. This is their little 5.8 gigahertz FPV transmitter. Now, although we're going to be using these, I will talk about using traditional bits and pieces as well for those of you that just want to use standard FPV receivers, transmitters and cameras, and also potentially want to use things like minim OSDs with it as well. So the first thing we'll do then is we'll jump into a couple of slides and we'll actually talk about some of the connections in here. So the first FPV option that we've got is to actually connect the camera and the FPV transmitter directly to the two outlets at the front of the power distribution board at the bottom of the cube. Now, we actually saw these two power outlets when we first were looking at the cube in the very first video, and the way it works is the one on the left is the FPV transmitter connection and the one on the right is for the FPV camera. And we actually do have a set of leads that come with the kit that are already made up, and they're also showing you the default voltage that's set for that port. The way it comes set from Team Black Sheep is the camera is set for 12 volts, and that's usually the voltage that you need for CCD high quality cameras, and the video transmitter is set for 5 volts. Now, if you're using something like Immersion RC or Fat Shark transmitters, then they typically want to run on 12 volts and the cameras like to run on 5 volts. So there is a way that you can change it. So underneath the main picture here on the left hand side, you can actually see that there's little soldered connections. So if you're very careful with a fine tipped soldering iron, or if you just undo your stack, you can actually bridge the two pieces. The camera one can either be set to 12 or 5 volts, and the video transmitter can actually be soldered 12 or 5 volts, or actually go to the main battery voltage if you have a different battery voltage that you want to use. So be aware of that when you're setting this up. So the simplest way to do it is to plug your video transmitter and your FPV camera directly into those clean DC voltages at the bottom of the stack. Use the cables that are provided and you're good to go. Just double check and make sure that the voltages you're getting are the ones that you need for the camera and also the video transmitter that you're using. Now, the other thing that you can do is you could actually use a minim OSD if you wanted an on-screen display and you didn't want to use the Team Black Sheep kit. Now, we've done a lot of videos around the minim OSD and they've been set up on things like the Seriously Pro 3, the Naze 32, so I'm not going to cover all of that here, but I will link to those videos. So if you click on this link at the top right hand corner, the card will take you so you can watch it. Now, there are two UARTs that are available that you can configure for MSP telemetry that will work with a minim OSD, and on the board the one at the very front is UART 1 and the one at the very back, which is highlighted and marked up for GPS mag or altimeter, is UART 3. And you would wire it up just as we do with all of the other minim OSDs, is you would connect the ground to ground, plus 5 volts to plus 5 volts, the receive pin to the transmit pin, and vice versa. So this is an option for those of you that have a cube and want to use an existing minim OSD and FPV setup. You can use the standard clean flight telemetry settings to get this all working. The next option then is to do what we're going to do in this video here and actually use the TBS Core Pro. Now, the TBS Core Pro actually plugs into the very bottom of the stack. So if we go back to the bench, you can see that there's this port here on the side. So the two ports in here that you can't quite see are the ones for the video transmitter and the camera that we're being looking at. And then you have this other port here. And this is where the TBS Core Pro plugs into. And this is one of the things that is special about the CleanFlight version that's running on here, is that it gives you the ability to send all the telemetry data down to that port, and then your TBS Core plugs into it and then does all of the rest of the work for you. Now the TBS Core itself, again, just like the power distribution board things that we've looked at in the previous slide, allows you to select the voltages for both the camera and the video transmitters out. And again, by default, video transmitters set to 5 volts, cameras set to 12. If you take the case of the outside of your TBS Core, then here's the inside of mine before I changed it. There's the defaults and the soldered pads, so you can just unbridge and solder the right connections. So I've changed mine so that both the camera and the video transmitter are both set to 5 volts. Once you've done those settings, you can button everything up. Once you've done that, then you can plug the TBS Core into a computer and start configuring it. So let's talk about that next. Everything we're covering in the video is all detailed in the manual, so you can actually go and find the manual, and I'll show you where you can get it from in a minute, but here's the address, and in here is all of the detail that we're talking about. So if something that I'm explaining doesn't make sense, then you can scroll through here and we've got all the information about all the connections, how it works, what it looks like, how you configure it, and also how you do things like the software updates too. So to get this manual, the easiest way to get it is, rather than remember the address at the top, is actually go to the teamblacksheep.com shop and go and find the TBS Core Pro. If you scroll down below the very top bit, you'll find a link to both the manual and the TBS agent. Now the TBS agent is the software you need. I've already downloaded that, so let's close this window. This is what it looks like, and I'm going to plug in the OSD for the first time. So I haven't installed any drivers, I'm on Windows 10, it should just work. There we go, perfect. So let me just wait while it updates for definitions, because we can see we're on version 1.12 now. This is how it came supplied. So we're just going to wait until it finds it. There we go. So the latest version is 1.32. So I'm going to click update. In fact, let's just check the release notes. So here's all the things that have changed. There's loads of things that have changed since the last version. So we'll definitely do the update. So we'll click update, and we need to make sure if we have any peripherals that they're connected. We don't, so we can say OK. And this is the bit where we're going to wait. Now I have speeded this part up. It probably takes about 7 or 8 minutes to actually do the full firmware update. So I'm just going to fast forward through this bit and we'll pick it up at the end. So we're just about to finish. It's scanning for peripherals. It isn't going to find any. And we're done. Now, as it reboots, you'll notice now there's another tab which says OSD settings. So if I click in there, it'll allow me to change everything. Now, we can change this stuff on the actual device itself, but it'll just allow me to click it. So here are all the speed units and distance units. I'm going to select US, or in the UK, we know that as imperial. That's feet, inches, miles an hour. So we'll just go through and select everything. It all looks great to me. So once it's all done, then if you just flick back into it to confirm it's okay, then we're all set. So now we've updated the firmware, and we've also connected the different voltages, so we've got the right ones. We can now talk about how we're going to connect this up into the actual cube itself, to the camera and the FPV transmitter. So let's do that now. So to connect the TBS Core up to the PowerCube is pretty straightforward. All you do is you take one of the BST connections, use the cable that's provided, you just pop that into the bottom of the PowerCube, and there we are, it's wired in. Now the other two sides, of course, are going to be for the camera and the video transmitter. The camera wire, you can see I've actually modified it slightly. I like to use Fat Shark cameras, like this one here. This is a 700 TVL line camera, and it just means that I can just plug the end into the camera connector without clipping anything off the camera, and the other side then is to the video transmitter. Now at this point what I'd recommend is just powering everything up, not to check that the OSD is working, but simply to just double check with the voltmeter that you actually have the right voltages on each side, either 5 volts or 12 volts depending on how you soldered those pads. Now the video transmitter itself that we're going to plug into here is a little bit unusual. It isn't the normal Immersion RC one. We're actually going to use this little guy here. Now this is a Team Black Sheep Unify 5.8 gigahertz video transmitter, and it's worthwhile us actually talking about this before we plug this into the side. So let's jump onto a slide. So the TBS Unify is a great little piece of kit. It allows you not only to select any of the 40 available channels that are around, and you can see those listed in the bands below. So you have bands A, B, E. They call it airwave, but that's typically band F, which is what Immersion RC tend to use. And then you have the race band as well. Now, for those of you that aren't sure what race band is, I'll put a link to our video that actually explains race band so you can have a better idea. The really cool thing about this is not only can you select those multiple channels, which a lot of FPV transmitters allow you to do, it also allows you to select the power level. So you can, using that single little button that we saw at the front of the device and an LED, you can select whether or not it runs at 25 milliwatts, 200 milliwatts, 500 milliwatts or 800 milliwatts, and that's great because for most of the places 25 milliwatts is the legal limit. So if you're flying in a place that is 25 milliwatts maximum, you can set it to that. If you're lucky enough to fly somewhere where you can go to higher powers, you can set it to that too, and that's all available within the one single device. So to connect that up to the actual on-screen display, you just plug the cable that comes in the kit into the back of it, and there you have your transmitter connected. The only thing I have found about this FPV transmitter that I'm not a fan of is the connector itself that came on mine is the type in the middle that has the pin rather than the hole. That means that you can't use an Immersion RC transmitter by default. What I've had to do is actually get myself a little SMA adapter, a standard Fat Shark style antenna. So that's the only thing I think you need to be a little bit careful of. So let's actually go and let me just power this up. I'm going to check first of all that the voltages are all okay, and I'm getting 5 volts out of each side. Then I'm going to connect both of the FPV transmitters and cameras onto here. Then we'll come back and power everything up and see if we have an on-screen display that's working without changing anything else in the PowerCube. So here's the image from the DVR that's actually in the goggles that we're going to be looking at the on-screen display with. So let's plug in the battery and see if we can see anything. Now the thing I will say before I plug anything in is that the aerial, whenever you power the transmitter, does have to be plugged in. If you power up a transmitter without an aerial plugged in, then you can damage the transmission electronics. And you can see here that we actually do have just enough room in the frame to fit the OSD and the video transmitter, which is very small. This little Unify Pro is a really small little piece of equipment in behind the flight controller within a ZMR 250 frame. So let's plug it in and see what we can see. So there we are, we can see it's found the PowerCube, and it's going to say RC calibration required. This is the first time we've ever done it. So what we're going to do is we are going to center our sticks on the transmitter. So we're going to put the throttle in the middle, and we're going to make sure everything's okay. Then we're going to press the enter key, which is the middle key in the 3 buttons that are on the side of the OSD. So let me press that. There we go, and now we have everything working. So we actually do have a current sensor. You can see it here in the top right hand side. So we can see here that we actually have the battery voltage, 11.9 volts. We have the mode that we're in. We can see that we have 12 milliamp hours, and we also have how much current is being pulled, 0.6 of an amp from the battery. So there is a current sensor at the bottom of the PowerCube, which is something I wasn't expecting. We can see the time at the bottom. When we arm it and fly, that'll go up. The only thing that we can't see yet is the RSSI value. Now I have set up the RSSI value within the clean flight bits and pieces itself. That telemetry information though isn't been displayed on the screen, and we'll have a look at that in a later video to see if we can get that working. But I would say that that's all fine. There is one thing that we need to be careful of though. If we actually jump onto the bench, let me very quickly show you how everything's laid out. So this is how I ended up connecting my camera to the input of the on-screen display. Now you can see the top pin here is video, and then the power are the middle two. Be aware that that's the case. One of the things that I found when I was setting this up that caused me a little bit of a problem was, unless the on-screen display is seeing a camera signal coming in, it won't initialize and work. So just be aware of that, and if you're having trouble where you're just getting a black screen or nothing's working, check that you have a camera plugged in, and also check that that camera pinout is connected properly. When I first started to do this, I accidentally plugged the cable into the wrong input, and that caused me the problem. So just make sure you're aware of that image that we've just looked at, and you should be fine. So hopefully now, if you're looking at this equipment, you should now have an on-screen display that's going to work for you too. So thanks again to Trappy and the team for sending this to try, and please subscribe for other videos in the series. Thank you for taking the time to watch that video. There are lots of other videos on the channel, and they're carefully ordered into playlists, so you may find that there are other videos on this same subject that you can go and watch. So I would recommend going into the playlist area of Painless 360 YouTube channel and looking around and seeing what there is. You never know what you might find. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and happy flying.